Biden's fight to cancel student debt is back on the menu after a long hiatus. Back in the summer of 2022, as a quick refresher, Joe Biden announced a plan to cancel student debt for 43 million Americans, which was a total of $400 billion. Now, this plan was blocked by the Supreme Court, and there was a lot of uproar about it at the time. It kind of went, and the reason that the Supreme Court blocked it was because of the statute that Biden wrote this order under. He used the HEROES Act. Now, this was passed in, I believe, 2003, following 9/11. And in this statute, the president was given the authority to cancel student debt in times of a countrywide crisis.
Yeah.
So he was using, what's up?
Was it 2022 or 2023?
No, it was definitely 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he was citing the COVID emergency as giving him the authority under the HEROES Act to cancel the student debt. Now, this was hard because in other cases, Biden was arguing that the COVID pandemic was over in relation to the change in Title 42 policy with immigration policy. He was in court saying, COVID thing is over. We don't need to do Title 42 anymore. And then he's saying HEROES Act, COVID. But so it was a hard legal fight for him to make.
Yeah, and the reality was COVID was not an emergency by that point.
At that point, it was not an emergency. He was just using it to try to make his political goals there.
Yeah.
So now he's coming back. He has a new plan. It's very different. It's not as broad. It's not as big on debt cancellation. It's more about debt relief than cancellation entirely. But we'll get into more of the specifics. But he's using the statute for the Higher Education Act, which activists have been pushing him to use originally. The activists pushing for student debt cancellation and debt relief were asking him to use the statutory authority in the Higher Education Act back in the summer of 2022. Okay. And he chose to use the statutory power of the HEROES Act. Now, why he chose the HEROES Act at the time? Probably because it gave him broader sweeping power to flat out cancel stuff, which the Higher Education Act doesn't really have the same broad powers. And what the Higher Education Act statute differs so mostly in is he needs to target interest groups of people, and it can't just be blanket. So he targets 5 specific groups of people. I recommend you look up and you find out if you're in one of those 5. But I'm going to give you a couple here. So people who have loan balances who have ballooned because of interest. He makes this a big point. People whose loans have grown beyond the amount that they originally borrowed because of interest can have up to $20,000 of that interest wiped away. So it's not any of the principal that's going to be wiped away or rejected. It's only going to be the interest that's accumulated past your principal. People making less than $120,000 a year would qualify, or couples making less than $240,000 a year would qualify to have their interest forgiven off their loans. This would obviously be very helpful for a lot of people. People who have been paying for like decades, multiple decades, would seek debt cancellation or debt relief. People who can qualify for economic hardship and prove that. And then there's other categories too that I recommend you look up. So the White House lawyers have studied the Supreme Court decision from the summer of 2022 and have designed this program in great detail to specifically match any or reject any concerns that came from that past decision. So they really tailored this new program to not get challenged in the same way. Apparently, there are 2 million borrowers who technically qualify to have their student loans waived under existing programs, but don't have the wherewithal or know how to apply for them to get them relieved. So the Biden administration has new rules set up where the Department of Education doesn't have to wait for the applications from those people. Okay. They can just cancel it without having to get the application from the person. Okay. So this is just eliminating some of the lines that it takes and some of the red tape it takes to get people the government programs that they've already kind of should already have access to. Yeah. Apparently, Biden's new plan would amount to 25 million borrowers still owing on their undergraduate or graduate student loans. So there's still going to be like 25 million people that are going to have student loans after this.
That's not what you're saying.
You're
saying the plan would reduce their amounts owed for 25 million borrowers.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So there are 25 million people who would be affected by this policy change. It would wipe away the entire amount for around 4 million Americans altogether. And then 10 million borrowers could see debt relief up to $5,000 or more. I want to note that he announced this plan in Madison, Wisconsin, which was not an accident. That was a college town. So he knows who he's talking.
State.
In a swing state, it's an election year.
Yeah.
He knows what he's talking about and who he's talking to.
This is the Biden side of everything that they do in an election years for the election. I don't particularly like this plan. Specifically, so a big argument that's used that I don't align with is it's not fair to all the people that paid off their debts. Mm-hmm. I think that's an argument that can be made for almost any welfare program,
any policy, ever.
So, not on board with that. But there are the first thing is over 80% of people in the country don't have student loans. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, one of the biggest corollary factors to people being wealthy is people going to college. So they're the people who can often most afford to pay these loans. Of course, that's somewhat helped by limiting it to people making less than $120,000 per year, but $115,000 per year is still a person who can totally afford to pay their student loan debt off.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's, as far as some kind of cost relief, it's not the best targeted thing. But past that, I think it's the inflationary pressure that I'm most worried about. You're talking about even loosening the purse strings that much more of 25 million people when we already just earlier this episode talked about stubbornly high inflation that just won't go down.
Like what this technically is a tax cut for people who got educated.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's what this is.
Yes.
My biggest concern, I do understand there's inflationary pressure to this for sure. Joe Biden is going through a lot of inflationary inducing policies right now. He really is. He's proposing a tax credit for first-time home buyers, which doesn't really do anything to solve the problem. He's making some bad policy decisions right now that I do not agree with. But I don't disagree with this entirely. What I do disagree with, I don't agree with the $120,000 income.
Okay.
I think it should be differentiated by state.
Sure.
Right, like 120,000. Yeah, canceling somebody's student loans if they live in New York City, if they only make 120,000, that makes sense. If they're in Tennessee and they make 120,000, then it doesn't make as much sense.
Sure, but so I must say, even 120,000, even in New York City, 120,000 is like you're okay.
Yes, you're okay, and I do think it should be differentiated by state. I do think it should be lower than 120,000. I don't know what the right number is, but it should be I don't think that's the right number because $120,000. I mean, the median income in the United States is what, 65?
Yeah, something 70, around 65. Yeah,
something like that. So if that's what the median income is, and you're going to say all the way up to 120, this stuff gets canceled for, that just seems a little ridiculous. Yeah. Especially if you're going to be canceling like graduate student loans, when we know that people who have graduate degrees are making way more money than any other category.
Yeah, well, America. At that point, it's the people that we're talking about wanting to raise taxes on, so we don't have to have such a deficit and such an enormous debt. Yeah, right. And so we're going in the opposite direction. For political gain.
Yeah, for political gain. And I don't disagree with the notion that people who are just getting into the workforce don't have enough disposable income and like they're not consuming as much as like we'd expect them to. Like we would expect kids, or not really kids anymore, young adults our age to be getting to the point of buying a house at 25. We would like an economy where that's the case.
Sure.
So like the idea is I could have been saving for a house the last 2 years as an employed person, and I could have been saving a butt ton of money.
Yeah.
But no, I had to spend so much of it going to my student loan.
Yeah,
right?
but these policies specifically they're Band-Aid solutions.
No, they're all
that
Band-Aids.
Are not fixing the structural problems.
No, this has nothing to do with the structural problems of this. The structural problem is college has gotten too expensive.
Exactly.
It's guaranteed subsidized by the federal government in a private institutions that have no reason to cut down costs. They have no incentive to do so. The correct structural solution is state-run, free public institutions that then compete with private institutions and pull down prices because everybody has a free option.
Yes.
Right? That's the real solution here.
Yeah, totally.
Do I think that this is an okay Band-Aid for right now? I think it's like okay. I don't think it's like detrimental to the economy. I don't think it's going to be that inflationary, to be honest.
I think it really could be. I think it really I think the cost of this might be something like, or maybe it was only the first The first
one
version
was
that I saw.
400 billion.
This one might be around 300 billion. There was a
That seems high, but okay.
it might be less, but even let's say it's half of the first one.
Yeah.
There was a study done by one of the Federal Reserve offices that found that the inflationary impact might be 1.7%.
That's a nightmare.
That's a nightmare.
That's bad.
Say it's half of that.
That's bad.
Still bad.
That's bad.
So
No, that's bad.
Yeah.
And this is a really good example of why throwing money at things is not the correct answer to everyone's problems.
yeah,
It
exactly.
is not the correct. Throwing money at places does not do what we need them to do.
Yeah.
Because we need to be able to. It's so much more about controlling and the process of production and the
Yes.
distribution of things.
Yes.
It's like
It's about placing the right incentives, not just paying to make someone in the immediate term more okay.
I have to say, this is one of my issues I have with capitalism, is that so much of this is we're just throwing money into the market, and the philosophy that people operate in this liberal world is people don't have enough access to the market to get their things they need. But the actual truth is there's underlying issues with the market that we're not producing the things that we need to be produced.
Okay.
And that's what's causing inflationary pressures. And you would think that the increased consumption of those goods would increase production, but it doesn't always work that way all the time. So
Okay.
that's like one of my underlying issues with capitalism generally, with these types of solutions.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's one of my issues I have with UBI too. Right? That's one of my underlying issues with UBI is just throwing money at something isn't really the best way to do it all the time.
Sure.
It needs to be targeted. It needs to be effective. And I don't think this is.